Prologue. Reminiscences of a Man Left to Burn.
It's been 14 years since the second sun destroyed the world and abandoned us to die. It's been 14 years since God killed us.
Connor's spirits sank as he spoke.
I still recall the voice of the second son and the exact words spoken that day. How oft would I have sacrificed myself to save you, but you would not. I know you all in perfect clarity, and there are none good among you. You sanctified greed and vilified reason. When met with innocence, you did not so much as ask her name before tearing her from existence. You have eyes, yet see nothing. I've shut my eyes, and I see everything. On this day, the second sun will set, and as you push one another's heads under the poison to keep your own afloat, so will you drown in toxicity and fire. I've paid the price of perfection, my inevitable ascension.
Chapter 1. 200 years earlier. The Steam Age. What was it that gave people the right to live? Velina gazed out from atop the cliffs encircling the city of Eden and the sea beyond as she pondered the question. The serenity emanating from its golden towers and pristine canals utterly failed to reflect the vileness of its inhabitants. Was it simply being born that gave such a right? No. Everyone was born through no credit of their own. It's how people choose to live their lives that matters, and by that standard, everyone Velina knew deserved to die. Everyone except for Lux. 2 years earlier, before Velina had met her, Velina's father had attempted to rob Lux at knife point, a near-fatal mistake. Lux smashed her boot into his face, drew a hand crossbow, and held it to his throat. Such a story would have been nothing out of the ordinary for Eden, but Lux was different. She had every reason to kill him. Instead, she told him he should have just asked politely so she could have given him her money voluntarily. Without lowering her crossbow, she reached into her pack, gave him all the platinum pieces she had, and encouraged him to choose a better life. Floored that someone with such character even existed in the world, Velina sought her out. The two quickly became friends and spent the next 2 years working together as hunters. Poachers, as the lawmakers labeled the profession. But the fact that it was illegal held little sway as Velina knew firsthand that the lawmakers were nothing more than smiling, designer suit-wearing puppets for the actual rulers of Eden, the mob. Still, to the girl's satisfaction, the illegality of hunting also brought about the pleasant side effect of making it incredibly lucrative. That is, until one day their client refused to pay what they had promised. Velina had plotted for days. No longer would she stand for all the lies and unpaid sums. Though some would readily suggest she simply kill her debtors, the thought never loitered in her mind in any serious fashion. In fact, she had never killed anyone before and hoped such would remain true until the day she died. Still, she was determined to make up her losses via other means. After all, it can't really be called thievery when one reclaims what is rightfully theirs, can it? All the meticulous preparation had led to this moment. Standing with her leather boot just over the cliff edge, Velina eyed the target sitting directly below her, the Museum of Ancient Life and Civilization. Therein lay her prize. Giving her rope a couple of firm tugs, she grew confident that she was, in fact, not about to plummet to her death. Adrenaline pumped through her veins as she rappelled down the cliffside, savoring the thought of imminent justice. Upon reaching the top floor of the museum, she took a final look across Eden with its glimmering steam stacks and clock towers. There was no turning back now. She shattered a stained glass window and climbed inside. "You break it, you buy it," said a pleasant but teasing voice. Velina looked up and saw the source, a tall, slender girl with platinum hair and a beaming smile. "Well, Lux, how about we just let them take it out of our fee?" Lux laughed. "I suppose that's one way to do it. Goodness, why didn't they just pay us as promised? Would have made life a lot simpler for everybody." "You know what they say, everything happens for a reason," answered Velina. "It just so happens that in this case, the reason is they're stupid and make bad decisions." Lux was a girl of many talents. Having completed her university studies in biochemistry by age 18, she was a total prodigy. Since then, her skill in medicine had more than often proven useful. But today was a day when her poisons came in handy, as the rhinoceroses rampaging through the live animal exhibit would attest. Perhaps her most defining quality was her love of animals. bacon, steak, and to a lesser extent, chicken. She was also quite fond of the live versions and kept many pets. 2 years ago, upon graduation, she was torn between 2 professions that would allow her to be with her furry friends frequently: veterinarian or hunter. With Violina's persuasion, she became a hunter, as it allowed her to wear her furry friends. On this occasion, she wore a long, thin coat of black leather, and she insisted it was absolutely fitting for a heist. Violina eyed Lux's pack. "Have you got our weapons?" Lux repeated the question as if Violina had asked the obvious. "Do I have our weapons? Violina, I'm practically Discount Weapons Warehouse over here. Take your pick." She opened her satchel and organized neatly therein lay 2 hand crossbows, a hydraulic hammer, and Violina's personal favorite, an electric chain whip. "You aren't planning on actually using these, are you?" Violina brushed her long scarlet hair from her face. "Of course I'm planning on using them. I don't need to fire a weapon to use it. You know as well as I do that when trying to persuade people, a weapon combined with charisma achieves far greater results than just charisma alone." Lux simply grinned and began heading down the hall. Between the marble tile, velvet carpets, and sheer size of the place, the museum was nothing short of lavish. Despite all this, the museum insisted that they have been fined so heavily for playing God that they were unable to pay their under-the-table suppliers. Playing God was the label the lawmakers used for the crime of reviving Drykadin, previously extinct ancient creatures. Violina didn't know how the museum did it, nor did she really care. Her talents lay more heavily in taking life than in creating it. Regardless, with the lawmakers declaring the Drykadin hatchlings to be contraband, enforcers were on their way to confiscate them. She couldn't help but smile as thoughts of the museum manager squirming to explain why he couldn't turn over the hatchlings as ordered lingered satisfyingly in her mind. "A bit deserted in here, don't you think?" asked Violina. "Yes, well, no doubt the minimum wage security guards all left to deal with the aftermath of my rhino fun." Lux was practically glowing. As the girls entered a room dedicated to ancient creatures and artifacts, Violina found herself staring at a colossal skeleton of a Drykode. "Wow, I hope the hatchlings are easier to handle than this thing would imply." While the head was disproportionately large compared to its body, so was its tail, which must have kept it balanced. Who said 2 wrongs couldn't make a right? Lux paused as if to admire its teeth and spear-like claws. I give it a solid 33 stars, she announced. Which, by the way, is a nearly perfect score on the Lux scale TM. 33 stars, and how does that compare to the scale you usually use? The one that goes from spiders to penguins? Just between a swan and a chinchilla, of course. Lux spoke as if such was common knowledge. "But it's dead," interjected Violina, deciding not to probe into why Lux felt the need to adopt her own bizarre rating systems. "And the dead are pathetic when it comes to doing anything besides rotting." "Sigh," said Lux in a tone unbecoming of her usual bubbly self. "The inevitable end of us all. It's really kind of a shame, isn't it?" She also had a knack for understatements. "Did you really just say sigh verbally? I don't think you understand how sighing works." Violina then approached some other displays. A glorious and technologically advanced ancient civilization had once inhabited Eden, and there was no shortage of artifacts to prove it. Although ruined, these were sleek and sophisticated objects of glass and onyx. No one knew who these people were, nor why they vanished from history, but whatever happened had sent humanity into a second Stone Age. One display especially caught her eye. While all the other artifacts resembled one another, this one was unique. It was as if it didn't belong. No bigger than a pocket watch, the gold and azure contraption was flawless. Curiosity getting the best of her, Violina looked around to ensure they were still alone. "What do you think, Lux? I know we're pressed for time, but shall we take a closer look?" "Definitely. Always follow your heart." Which, by the way, I learned from a book entitled Always Follow Your Heart. Anyway, I think a key can be found in the... Lux was interrupted by the sound of Violina's heel smashing into the glass encasement. Ignoring the mess she had created, Violina lifted the device for a closer look. Whatever the metallic surface was made of, it was unlike anything she had ever felt. It was so warm to the touch, unfittingly so for the coolness of the room. "It's impossible to look at something like this and not wonder," said Violina, not taking her eyes off the contraption. We sprang into existence wrapped in a world with no idea of how things came to be, nor what will become of us. We're practically blind. There's just so much we don't know. Lux smiled. Well, I know we could probably pawn this off for a fair bit of platinum later. Violina laughed and placed it in her leather pack strapped to her thigh. Yes, and perhaps even to this very museum. I can't think of anything more fitting. Hastening to return to their primary task, the girls soon came to a door labeled Authorized Personnel Only, behind which they found a security guard seated. She eyed the girls as they approached and was clearly forcing a smile.
Good morning,
said the guard, her voice carrying the sort of cheerfulness heard when mothers talk to 4-year-old children. Apparently, she was unaware of the rampant chaos at the other end of the museum.
What brings you to the lab?
Lux stepped forward. Yes, we have an appointment to finalize the checks of the Drycaden hatchlings prior to confiscation and conditions. Checks and conditions. Lux also had a talent for awkwardness.
Really?
The woman slid a check-in list across the desk. Then
I'll need your identification and passcodes.
Violina took a quill with a giant fake flower attached to the back of it and complied with the request. Identification. I'm armed. Passcode. And in a bad mood. Violina then handed the paper back and patted her hand crossbow. The woman coughed with widened eyes.
Yes, I see. Well then, access granted.
She then motioned for Violina through the double doors behind her. Violina was pleased with her success, but disappointed that the guard was willing to put the lab workers' lives in danger for the sake of her own skin. Of course, the girls weren't planning on any violence transpiring during this heist, but plans had been known to go awry. With the pull of a switch, the sounds of steam engines grew louder until a pleasant ding rang out and a pair of elevator doors opened. So what are you going to do with your half of the payout? Asked Violina as they began their descent. 2 words. Indoor water slide. Lux's excitement made it clear she had already put a lot of thought into this. What? We don't even have a pool. Yes, about that, began Lux, not meeting Violina's eye. We need to have a little chat about what you should do with your half. Hint, it's a pool. As fun as that would be, I rather doubt this one job will net us enough to do something so crazy. Sure it will, think about it. These may be the only Drycaden the world will ever see. I'm sure we could net at least a few thousand platinum, enough to keep us free and comfortable for the rest of our lives. The rest of our lives. Violina didn't know how such a payout could possibly last them more than a year or two. Maybe if we plan on dying in our mid-20s. Still, continued Lux, not a bad sum for such a small amount of work. In fact, I don't even know if I can call this work at all. I see it more as a recreational activity. And to think, the lawmakers were planning to squander such a beautiful opportunity. At the very least, they could have sold the poor creatures and made a dent in the Indian deficit. The bitterness in Violina's voice was thick. But to incinerate them just to give puppet-like heed to the voice of the less-than-brilliant masses? Insanity. Typical lawmaker approach to problem-solving. It is really messed up on so many levels, affirmed Lux. In fact, literally. You know, because we're discussing it while riding an elevator. At last the lift reached the bottom floor, and its steam engine subsided. Darting across the floor, Violina clutched her whip in her offhand. She had never been down here, but thanks to the floor plans Lux had liberated from the janitorial office, she knew exactly where to go. They soon arrived at the door to the zoology department. Kick it down on the count of 3, directed Violina, okay? Hang on, said Lux with an air of urgency. Let me get my game face on. What, and it takes you more than 3 seconds? Okay, ready, she chimed. 1, 2, 3. They attempted to kick the door open, but discovered it was locked. With the exception of some noise and sheepish expressions appearing across the girls' faces, nothing happened. Well, that was a good try, said Lux. Actually, not really, because we failed. I just didn't want to dampen our spirits. How thoughtful of you, replied Violina in monotone. Here, let me charge up Miss Helga. Miss Helga was their affectionately named hydraulic hammer. Violina charged it up and obliterated the hinge while Lux, ready with her boot against the door, pushed it down with a resounding crash. With weapons drawn, they stepped inside.
What in the name of the second son do you 2 Jillfords think you're doing?
Barked a lab worker. This was a terribly offensive thing to say in Eden. Not because of jail flirts, but because almost everyone believed the second son was the instrument God used to save mankind from the thaumaturgist Xar some 500 years ago. Beyond all understanding, the man had almost single-handedly exterminated the whole of Eden. History showed that prior to the defeat of Xar, there was only one son, but why the second son even existed was hotly debated. Some went so far as to believe the second son was God himself, and to use the title second son in such a context was nothing short of abominable. Not the politest nor smartest thing to say to someone who just kicked down your door, you know, remarked Violina. Staring down the bolt of her crossbow, the man closed his mouth and made the wiser choice of raising his hand slowly towards the ceiling. Several other frightened lab workers followed suit and raised their hands as well. Out of the corner of her eye, Violina noticed one man who didn't look so fearful. Predictably, he lunged at the girls. Violina pressed a switch on her whip and sparks filled the air as she struck him to the floor. The crowd went dead silent. "Relax, guys," said Lux in a calm and even cheery voice, as if this sort of thing happened all the time. "We're just here for the Dragon hatchlings. The enforcers are coming to confiscate them anyway, so it's not even like we're stealing anything from you." "Exactly." Violina nudged the unconscious man a couple times with her boot. "So let's keep any wannabe heroics to a minimum, shall we?" An older man motioned for the girls to follow.
This way, then,"
he grumbled. As they walked down an aisle stacked with cages of various animals, a static-filled voice sounded through the lab.
Attention! Everyone remain calm. Intruders have entered the lower floors. Enforcers are en route. Please stay where you are.
Lux shook her head. Wow, they never cease to amaze me. Do they really think we're just going to stay where we are for the enforcers? Sometimes it was difficult for Violina to tell whether Lux was being serious. Well, I don't think that announcement was directed at me and you, Lux. She turned to the man. Can we hurry it along a bit, please? We apparently have deadlines. His expression dripping with reluctance, the man pointed to a nearby cage. The sight took Violina by surprise because she had always believed Drykadon to be reptilian creatures, but these were fluffy white hairballs attached to teeth, claws, and a stub of a tail. Lux's eyes looked as though they would burst with joy. Oh my goodness, who knew they'd be so adorable? She stretched a surgical mask across her face and sprayed a smoky blue gas, knocking them out one by one. I'm really kind of surprised the lawmakers didn't want to try selling these to charity or something. Wasting no time, Violina loaded the 3 hatchlings into a burlap sack. Shall we be off? I presume you have our exit ready to go? Asked Lux. Not yet. Violina retracted a panel on her bracer, and with the flip of her switch, thunderous crashes erupted from the corridor. Unlike Lux, Violina did not attend a university. Instead, she spent her days engineering the arsenal of gadgets and weaponry that led to her wildly successful hunting career. Particularly useful today were the remotely activated explosives. Lux watched with an expression of annoyance as the lab workers screamed and fled for cover. Seriously, would you be so kind as to sit down and take it easy for a moment? Even when shouting, Lux made politeness a priority. Violina hoisted the sack over her shoulders, where it rested across the back of her corset. Beckoning for Lux to follow, she led the way through her freshly created hole in the wall and into a dark tunnel. Just then, the familiar elevator ding sounded from behind them, and a squad of enforcers clad with riot shields and clubs stormed towards the girls. Listen up, shouted Violina. We don't particularly wish to kill you all, so if you decide to follow us, let the first fatality you encounter in this tunnel serve as a final warning. With that, the girls lowered their goggles and disappeared into the darkness.
Stop! Stop right there!
Demanded one of the enforcers, but his voice faded as the girls continued their way through the passage. Poor dolts. Violina flipped a switch on the side of her goggles and a small light revealed the rocky slopes before them. Never underestimate the power of suggestion on the paranoid. I don't expect them to even start their pursuit anytime soon. Too busy working out their precious protocol. It's always so nice of them not to use any sort of lethal weaponry, commented Lux. I suppose we have the lawmakers to thank for that. Lux spoke in her best lawmaker impression. You know what would really help law enforcement take down criminals? Rubber sticks. Let's tax an extra 500,000 platinum to pay for the 100 meetings to determine what color they should be. To Violina's dismay, the mockery was not far from the truth. She despised corruption, and corruption was not just rampant in the government, but in nearly every individual she had ever met. With luck, however, selling the Drycaden hatchlings would bring her closer to finally achieving funds sufficient to swear off the world forever.